Hello and welcome to Ticket Manager's All Access interview series, engaging leaders from across the sports marketing spectrum to identify and explore critical issues in the business of sports, entertainment, sponsorship, activation, ticketing, hospitality, and even more than that. I'm your host, Jim Andrews. Joining me on this episode is Ishfeen Jolly, founder and CEO of Open Sponsorship, the world's largest digital marketplace connecting brands with athletes, creators, and influencers. Welcome, Ishfeen. It's a real pleasure to have you with us.
Jim, for having me on.
Absolutely. I think the regular listeners to this podcast know that I typically don't delve into the backgrounds of guests, but I do want to do that with you as a founder, because I think it's important to understand kind of where Open Sponsorship came from, the idea. And so can you just share your story and also then the backstory of the company that you founded almost 9 years ago now?
I suppose my story, fell into sponsorship, I suppose. I grew up playing sports. I grew up in England, hence the accent, but I did start the company when I was living out in New York in America and was a student athlete all my life, graduated from Oxford. Like many people, went into a career in consulting, boring office job and realized sports was my passion. And so I think there's a few routes to ticketing in America, but media or sponsorship, fell into sponsorship and absolutely fell in love with it. I thought, what a great form of marketing, what a great way of spending money. I know, Jim, that's obviously close to your heart as well. And so, did that successfully for a few years, predominantly based in India at the time. I worked on the Indian Premier League, the cricket tournament out there in its second year. So fascinating stuff. And then fast forward to, as you said, about kind of 8 years ago, when I had this like eureka moment of why is there not an Airbnb for the industry, somewhere that you can easily get deals done, more data driven, more matching based. We were all in our personal lives using LinkedIn and Uber and Airbnb, but in the professional sponsorship world, it was still like going to conferences or trying to find, I don't know how we used to do deals. And so, and that's kind of what we created.
Excellent. And I do want to kind of come back to kind of the idea and explore kind of the marketplace idea for partnerships, because I think it's fascinating. But before we do that, let's take a look at Open Sponsorship, and it's been very successful. As I mentioned, the digital marketplace where the brands are finding athletes and other influencers. Can you just give us a sense of the business now, maybe some of the relevant numbers, how many users you have, the deals, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have over 18,000 athletes. So that's on our supply side. About half are managed directly. So you can imagine that's a lot of like NIL athletes, Olympians, Peloton. Well, I suppose Peloton are bigger, but CrossFit maybe, UFC fighters. And then the other half, about 9,000, are managed by agents. And, an agent for us could be as big as like a WME or an IMG or a Rock Nation or Wasserman, who all use us. Or it could be a really small golf agent who reps his best friend or his next door neighbor. And so I think the main thing there is on the supply side, we make it free for them and we just take a take on the deal. Then on the brand side, I think we've done deals for maybe about 4,000 brands. And that's as big as a Walmart, JD Sports, Vitamin Shop, but all the way again down to like small startups. We've done equity deals, we do royalty deals, we do product only. So when you think about, one of your questions was deal value. Our average deal value is $3,500, but that is so skewed because, our biggest deal has been just shy of $1 million, but that's an anomaly. Typically our biggest deal, we maybe do one low six, very high 5-figure a quarter, or maybe a month, so not that much. And then we'll do loads of product only deals or $50, 100 deals, which, for a small athlete could be them paying for tournament entrance, right? Or paying for vitamins for the month or whatever it may be.
Right. And that's where, we were kind of talking about the long tail idea, right? It's those folks and how were they going to make those connections prior to there being a marketplace, so that's again kind of where the technology is so relevant for them. And is it literally as easy as if I'm a brand manager and I'm thinking I want to do some kind of an athlete or influencer campaign, I can just log in and kind of maybe put in search criteria for what I'm looking for?
Yeah, honestly, it really is as easy as that. I think the main thing is, so we've got amazing search criteria. It's funny. I was listening to a podcast actually over the weekend, and they were talking about all the AI regulation that's coming out of the government. And I found a very old pitch deck. I was working on something. And in 2018, actually, I think it was like 2016 or 2017, IBM on their homepage, not that anyone looks at IBM's homepage, but on their homepage, they had 2 articles over the course of the year. And it was talking about how this new company was using AI to do athlete deals, and that was us. And that was like 2016. And now AI is such a big thing, and they've got talking about all these regulations. And so I think the thing being is like, we've got some amazing tools, but honestly, all the tools in the world, Jim, like let's say you have a coffee brand, you start out and you're thinking, oh, I'd like some Chicago athletes to come and taste my coffee. All the tools in the world are not going to tell you who's actually genuinely interested, or they can, but when you think about recruitment, the best thing that most people do today is they put up a campaign, a bit like a job posting. And so, Jim's new coffee brand, looking for athletes who love coffee in Chicago to come and taste this thing. We're offering $500 or $5,000, whatever you want to offer, and let people come into you. And that's really I suppose, the secret sauce, but it's not that secret of what we do, which is we turn the model on its head and we're allowing the agents and athletes to say, pick me. And that means more authenticity, better value, more commitment to actually see the deal through because we hold the money in escrow. And I think that's what we've created is like, it's not, these things are very common in recruitment or other areas, but for sponsorship, it was never done that way.
You use the word authenticity, and I think that's so important in these types of deals too. And that could be something that was often lacking kind of pre you coming along is, if I say to somebody, do you like coffee? They might say yes, just to get the deal done. And I don't know that they're really authentically a huge fan and know anything about the product. Whereas, if they've populated that information already, then I know, hey, they're not just responding to me and saying whatever they think I want to hear. So that's great. Yeah, I'm guessing you mentioned NIL, and I'm guessing it's fair to say that NIL rights for college athletes has probably been a big boon to your business. So can you tell us a little bit more about Open Sponsorship's role in the NIL space? Because there's so much going on. There's still so much that's still kind of unsettled in that area. So how are you playing a role there?
Yeah, I'd say controversially, I love it and hate it. So I love it for obviously what it stands for. I do think college athletes should get paid for, especially considering how few of them go on to be pro, and that could be a big part of their sports journey. I remember there was a number of the Stanford swimmers who were all in the Olympics, and there was someone who wrote an article, or I think we even looked at it, how much money they would have made if they were allowed to have made money during the Olympics. And it was crazy that just because they were at Stanford, they couldn't make that money, right? And so I love what it stands for. And I do love the uptake. Like we ourselves, of our 18,000 athletes, about a third are college athletes, which is insane considering we've been around 8 years and we've had so many pro athletes. And also it is really fun to see these athletes who sometimes are natural, better content creators. They're very good value, so they really work for the brands. Scaling is really easy, which is where we come in from. So all of those good things I absolutely love. The problem is that it's brought a lot of different entrants to the market, and we personally have a lot of copycats. And I know they say imitation is the best form of flattery, but when you're sitting on that side, yeah, exactly, you're a bit like, I don't need that flattery, I can take that in other ways. But so I think we've had a lot of copycats come in, and what sometimes happens is then it becomes this race to the bottom, because we'll sometimes have brands go, oh, but we can do something over there and it's free. And it's like, well, during COVID, we tried to make our platform free for brands to use. And what happened is we got a lot, because we knew that the athletes were hurting and people were generally hurting. And what happened is a lot of brands put up campaigns that they never were planning to really, there was I use this line, they kind of put up a campaign and we'd say, well, hey, 50 athletes have applied. Why are you not doing deals? And they were like, oh, we just wanted to see if LeBron James was going to apply. And you're like, well, you're offering $200. Of course, you're not going to get them. And that created a really bad atmosphere for both people. So I think the problem is if too many people are in it and they're not thinking about it strategically, it creates a race to the bottom and destroys margins and whatever else. And so I think we've tried to stick to, hey, we're trying to be premium here. We're trying to help you with strategy. If you just want lots of college athletes for free, there are probably other places to get them. If you want it in an effective and might not be the cheapest way, but it's going to be the best value way overall. So, like anything, it's a great space, but it brings its own challenges when it has so much attention on it.
Outside of or including the NIL space, are there certain kind of trends that you're seeing? I mean, you have such a great seat where you're able to see so much activity from the brands and from the athletes and influencers. Are there any trends that you see kind of emerging from all of the deals that are being done?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you three, and there's so many trends, but I'll give you three that I think are interesting for the audience as well. So one is that we're seeing many new people come into the influencer marketing space. That is kind of surprising. And then you think about it and you're like, of course, they're a brand, but we recently worked with the Premier League when they came to the US. And they were looking, their ticket sales in certain areas were not as great as some other places. And so they were like, how can we amplify this? And so we helped them connect with a couple of NFL players who did like videos being like so proud that the Premier League is coming to our home and, go buy tickets. And we've seen that the NFL we recently spoke to, they have a whole influencer program. At the conference that we were at in Chicago, I spoke to one of the local Chicago teams who were thinking about their influencer program. And so I think what's interesting is it obviously makes sense because everyone has a marketing budget, but suddenly, we're seeing almost like our supply is our demand. And that's kind of fun to be able to work with teams, leagues, events. There's an event for the rodeo and we're talking to them about using, and it kind of makes sense because if you're selling tickets or participation or attendance or whatever else, actually we work with Live Golf. And so obviously they're trying to drive eyeballs. It kind of makes sense that they're going to use athletes to do that, whether it's college golfers or whether it's anyone in the local community. So that's one. And then the second is, I think before you used to just talk about influence, like what's their demographic, what's their influence. But now we really need the content to be strong. And there's a massive demand on, it's great that you've got a lot of followers, but if your content's not good on social, you never create video, you don't post regularly, you're probably not going to get the brand deals. Definitely a bit of a challenge for us, but also an opportunity because we can then surface, which there's 1,800 players in the NFL. Here are the 20 that do post regularly that get great views on their reels, right? And so it's almost interesting because it's moving away from this idea that I'm going to work with the quarterback and more so to I'm going to work with the person who's the best content creator.
That's obviously such a huge aspect of this. And I know in the NIL space, that is probably the number one thing I think that brands are looking at is the social and digital content from those types of athletes. And yeah, that's a wide range of not only the amounts but how well it's done in terms of that content creation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there particular deals? I know you mentioned a couple of deals and brands that you worked with. Are some that you have been kind of particularly proud of or thought that were very successful for the partners?
Yeah, I think the first time you do anything, it's always really fun. So it's kind of a sad thing to say, but yeah. So I remember our first Paralympian deal with Sperry's, the shoe company, and that was really fun because you're like, we made that happen and it's good for both parties. And it's just really nice. So that was great. We recently did our first Formula One player deal with Alex Albon. So that was fun. I think the team really liked that. I remember the first time we did a NBA deal with Draymond Green. Again, I think it's like your firsts are always great. And then on the brand side, it is really nice when we see our brands leverage the assets they get from our athletes and use them across the place. So we have a channel in our Slack company group where people will share sightings of our deals across the internet. And so, for example, recently it was a CBD company and one of our team shared, she got hit with a Google ad with the image of the CBD and the athlete that she had set up as the account manager. And she was just like, oh, that's so cool. I made that deal happen. And so, when we see websites use the imagery on their homepages or in their email marketing, it's just, that it's working. And I think that's the biggest, even in sponsorship, there was always this is it working? Is it having an impact? And when you see that, you just feel like, oh, this is good.
You mentioned, obviously sponsorship is my background. And one of the things that I'm surprised at, and I'd love your take on it and tell me what you're seeing. I'm often surprised that more team sponsors and even league sponsors don't leverage athletes to activate their official partnerships. When we're working with brands and putting together activation plans, it almost seems like sometimes, and maybe I think sometimes they think it's going to be too expensive. They've already paid their sponsorship fees, so they're trying to manage costs, which of course is understandable. But would you say that many of the deals on open sponsorship are coming from brands that are looking to activate an official sponsorship, or are they more likely to be someone that's just looking to align with athletes without that having that team or league connection?
When we first set up open sponsorship, I was very naive. I think most founders have to be naive, otherwise you'd never do it. And I was like, this is going to be great. All the and I previously done some work with like FIH, the Olympic Hockey Federation, and, different governing bodies, different teams and whatever else. And we started it. And I was like, great, I'm just going to go in there and be like, we've produced this thing. Of course, you're going to use it. You're going to get all your athletes on board. You're going to get all your brands on board. And we're just going to be this amazing marketplace. And I always say like B2C is a little bit more logical because people think with their money, which is kind of logic. B2B is all mostly relationships and politics and different weird things that are going on. And so, exactly to your point. And one time I remember I was moderating a panel and I was sitting with the CEO of a sports governing body. And he was literally saying like, we're really supporting our athletes to do more and get deals. And I was like, really? And then, obviously followed up and nothing. So I'd say I still don't fully understand. The answer to your question is no. We have a very surprising few amount of people with the official rights. As you're saying, the thought process is there. I've already paid for the rights of the colors, the logos, the marks of the team or the league or the event. Of course, I should use an athlete and then I can put them together. We're not doing many of those deals. I think, somehow teams maybe have this thing that's like, oh, there you have to go through the agent. Right. And here this way. And then the other thing being is like, if that deal doesn't work out right, it might reflect on us, which I do understand. So, if the athlete doesn't post for you on time and you come running to us and say, oh, they're not doing a good job, then it suddenly affects my relationship. Exactly. But the problem is that these are actually such great assets for you. And we can guarantee more deliverability in all of this. So I wish we were doing more. I think it's a massively missed opportunity. And watch this space, because hopefully in a year's time, I'll tell you we fixed it and we are doing more.
You gained such great traction with open sponsorship and connecting brands and individuals. But as you kind of said, the digital marketplace has never taken off in terms of matching potential sponsors and properties, so teams, events, tournaments, that kind of a thing. And it's something close to my heart because I can't even remember. It was 20 years ago when I was involved in trying to start one of those, and it didn't take off. And why do you think that is a challenge? And is there a way to kind of unlock some of the benefits of a marketplace and technology, especially, again, when we get back to that concept of the long tail? I mean, the smaller properties and rights holders who often struggle to get in front of brands. Is there anything that you see that where technology could play a role in matching brands and organizations rather than individuals?
Yeah, lovely question. I'd say, interestingly, there's a point that's actually connected to your point prior, which is, I think, and you might know this better than I do, but sometimes what I hear from the market is that we're pretty good with selling the inventory we have, and we need new inventory to sell. And we've got these team of sales teams and department heads and account managers whose job is to like renew and upsell. And what we don't have is more stuff to sell, which is why maybe we're competition. So then it's all about, if that is the case, if that's not the case, then, there's really no reason why. If that is the case, then how do we create new inventory together? And a great example is actually going back to your prior point, which is how do official partners leverage the athletes? Now, a team may also argue, well, if they're already our official partner, then they should have enough coverage to that target demo already. So why do they need the athlete? And one thing I've talked to a couple of teams about is well, why don't we, let's say you're in Chicago and Chance the Rapper's in Chicago. Why don't we get Chance the Rapper to be, and let's say we know that he's a Bulls fan. So why don't we get him to do an influencer program for the Bulls, but why don't we package that up and sell it to a Bulls sponsor? So this way you're hitting quite a few different things, which is like new inventory, also new target demo outside of just the Bulls, because now you've got Chances following. And like actually 3, it's like a cool value add that's like influencer focus, which is what people think that. And so I think that's like where the miss might be, which is like, how do we jointly create new inventory? I think the other thing is like, I mean, I have not really looked into the ins and outs of team deals recently, but it feels probably similar to like athletes where there's a lot of focus on the top partnerships. Right. And so you need to be incentivized to do those like 25 to 100K deals. And of course, I would say there's a good benefit to that, which is like more partners means more reach, more visibility, more cool activations for your fan base, et cetera, et cetera. But if you think about like, you know, like Serena Williams is one of our investors, but even though she loves us, she's not doing smaller deals because of us. She's still going to do those $1 million, like those big deals. And so are teams at the point where they're thinking about doing the smaller deals, or are they just too busy servicing the big ones? And is that a good or bad thing? Like it's hard to say whether it is or not.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I think that is something that teams maybe struggle with, finding that right balance, because you don't want to create clutter and have, 75 $20,000 deals and have all of these brands kind of out there using your marks and logos and creating kind of competition for your bigger sponsors. But at the same time, you do want to create opportunities so that you're not just associating with brands that can afford a 7 or 8 figure sponsorship. And I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. And you said to me earlier, the technology has to be helpful and additive to the process. And that to me is where, and again, I'm going back to something you mentioned to me, you're not going to sell a stadium naming rights deal through a digital marketplace, right? That's going to take, there are only a few prospects for it. And, it's going to take a lot of in-person sitting down and hammering out all of the details that are involved in that. But when you start to get down to those lower level packages, that's where, the technology I think could be helpful. So. And I guess that kind of leads me to a last question, is just so what's next for you? What are you and Open Sponsorship, looking to do as you look, obviously, you would assume to keep growing and do different things. What's on the horizon for you?
Fun stuff. I'd say we are, there's a big thing, which is like around what are your customers for us, which is mostly the brands, what do they want, right? And as we talked about, one of the biggest trends is like good content creators. So that's guiding a lot of our stuff at the moment, which is how do we help our supply? How do we help our athletes and agents become better at delivering good quality content, which essentially is going to drive better ROI, get them more deals, get us more money. And so there's a lot around like ROI focus, which is like an absolute necessity, especially in today's times where people really care about their marketing budgets and everything else. So that's a big piece for us, which is like building tools and putting systems and people in place to help drive ROI. And then secondly, there's like the bigger stuff, which is like, well, where do we go next? Obviously we are international. 70% of our athlete base, about 85% of our brands are in the US, but as a technology platform, you're international from day one, really, is that as long as people can enjoy the English language website that we have. And so, what's next for us there? We talked about teams and events. Like, do we have an offering there? We're trying out a couple of things there. So lots of different things, but, really as a business, I think the focus for tech companies has changed from like grow at all expense to profitable growth or scalable growth. And so that's a big thing for us as well, which is finding ourselves better ways to go to market, cheaper ways to ourselves do marketing, cool partnerships. We love the idea of that. There's lots going on yet.
Great. So I definitely, as you said, we'll keep an eye on what's going on with you, because I think it's a really fascinating space that you're in, and I love talking to entrepreneurs and founders. So this has been a really great conversation. I hope that we will get to continue it in some way, shape, or form. And just for now, just thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jim. Thank you so much.
All right. And on behalf of everyone at Ticket Manager, thank all of you for watching and listening. And please join us again for the next episode in the All Access interview series.